Ambassador Lee Minute-Ho walked into the huge council room, his face showing no emotion even though all the alien beings were looking at him with hate and disgust. The walls of the room glowed with strange blue and green lights that moved like living things. These lights made scary shadows dance across the faces of the most powerful creatures in the galaxy. The room was enormous, bigger than any building on Earth. Floating platforms held the alien leaders high above the floor, making them look down at Minute-Ho like he was nothing more than an insect. The air smelled of strange chemicals and ozone, making it hard for him to breathe normally. "The decision is final, human," said Supreme Commander Vextar in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. He was the leader of the Zephyrian Empire, and he looked like a giant insect with 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. His red eyes glowed as he waved his arms at Minute-Ho like he was shooing away a fly. "Your species will give us 80% of your people to work in our mining colonies. You have 1 year to do this, or we will destroy your planet Earth." The being next to Vextar was even stranger. It looked like a living diamond that changed colors as it moved. This was the representative of the Crystalline Collective. When it spoke, its voice sounded like beautiful music, but the words were cruel. "Your people are weak and your machines are old and broken. You can only do simple work for us. You should be happy we are letting you live at all." The third alien leader was the most frightening of all. High Scion Mordan of the Void Walkers looked almost human, but his skin was gray and his eyes were completely black. He did not speak with his mouth. Instead, he put his thoughts directly into everyone's minds, and his mental voice was cold as ice. The words appeared in Minute-Ho's head without warning: "Most species we conquer get killed right away. You humans are lucky we need workers." Minute-Ho stood in the center of the room wearing a simple black business suit. Compared to the fancy armor and glowing weapons of the aliens, he looked very ordinary. This was exactly what he wanted. He straightened his tie and cleared his throat gently. "Great council members," he said in the calm voice of a professional diplomat, "thank you for your generous offer to let our people live. However, such an important decision needs careful thinking. I must ask for 72 hours to talk with our leaders on Earth before we can give you our answer." The request made all the aliens start laughing. Their laughter echoed through the huge chamber like the sounds of wild animals. Some of them made clicking noises, others roared, and a few created sounds that hurt Minute-Ho's ears. Vextar's mouth parts clicked together as he laughed. 72 hours to decide if you want to be slaves or die. How funny. Do you really think you have a choice? The crystalline being's musical voice became harsh. Perhaps the human needs time to count how many of his people he will sacrifice. Basic mathematics must be difficult for such a primitive mind. Mordan's psychic voice filled with cruel amusement as his thoughts invaded everyone's minds again. "Let the little human play at being important for 3 more days. It changes nothing. Soon they will all be in chains or in graves." Other alien council members joined in the mockery. There were dozens of different species in the room, each more advanced and powerful than humanity. They had conquered thousands of worlds and destroyed entire civilizations. To them, Earth was just another weak planet full of resources and workers to exploit. "Very well," Mordan announced, his mental voice now bored and dismissive. "You have your 72 hours, human. Use this time to prepare your people for their new lives as our servants. Do not waste it on foolish dreams of resistance." Minute-Ho bowed politely, just as he had been taught in diplomatic school. "Thank you for your patience and wisdom, honored council. We will not forget your kindness." As he turned to leave the chamber, none of the alien delegates paid attention to the small silver device pinned to his jacket lapel. It looked like a simple decoration, maybe a flag pin or company logo. They also did not notice the tiny smile that appeared on his face for just a moment as he pressed the device with his finger. The huge doors of the council chamber closed behind him with a sound like thunder. Minute-Ho walked down the long corridor leading to his small diplomatic ship, still maintaining his calm expression even though his heart was beating fast with excitement. Miles below the surface of Earth, in a secret facility hidden beneath the Seoul Institute of Technology, Dr. Park Soo-jin sat in front of dozens of computer screens showing information from all over the galaxy. She was an elderly woman with kind eyes and gray hair, but those who knew her understood she was one of the smartest people who had ever lived. A soft beep from her communication system made her look up. The message that appeared on her screen was short and simple: "The children are misbehaving again." Soo-jin smiled as she read these words. She had been waiting for this message for over 50 years. Around her, the underground facility buzzed with quiet activity as hundreds of technicians monitored systems that the galaxy had never seen before. She turned to her assistant, Kim Dae-eun, a young woman who was tracking communication signals from across human space. "Dae-eun," she said in a voice that was both gentle and commanding, "Please initiate Protocol 7. I think it's time we stop pretending to be something we're not." Dion's fingers moved quickly across her keyboard, sending coded messages to secret locations all over Earth and beyond. "Yes, Dr. Park. All stations are ready and waiting for your command." Sujin looked up at the ceiling, knowing that far above them, the aliens thought they had won an easy victory. They had no idea that humanity had been watching and waiting for this moment for decades. Inside the massive warship called Blood Talon, Supreme Commander Vextar stood in his command center surrounded by holographic screens that showed pictures and data about Earth's military forces. The room was decorated with gold and red metals, and the walls were covered with weapons taken from worlds his empire had conquered over thousands of years. "Look at this junk," Vextar said with disgust, pointing his four-clawed hands at images of human spaceships floating on the screens. "These ships still use chemical rockets like ancient toys. Their shields are so weak a child could break them with a stone. And their weapons? They still shoot metal bullets like primitive hunters." His officers laughed as they looked at the embarrassing pictures of Earth's space fleet. The human ships looked old and clunky compared to the sleek, powerful vessels of the Zephyrian Empire. The biggest human battleship was smaller than the smallest Zephyrian scout ship. Captain Zorhan, Vextar's chief military advisor, nodded his insect-like head enthusiastically. "Commander, our spies have been watching the humans for 50 years. They have no weapons that can travel faster than light. They cannot bend space or time. They have no mental powers at all. These humans have only been flying in space for less than 200 years. We have been conquering galaxies for 10,000 years. This will be easier than stepping on an ant." The other officers in the room made clicking and buzzing sounds that meant they were amused. To them, humanity was just another weak species that would soon be working in their mines and factories. Far across the galaxy, on a world made entirely of living crystal, another group was also studying humanity. The Crystalline Collective lived on a planet where everything was perfectly organized and mathematical. Their cities looked like giant geometric shapes that reflected light in beautiful rainbow patterns. Archive Node Quintessence was a being made of pure crystal that could think faster than any computer. It spent several hours analyzing every piece of information about human military strength. Finally, it spoke in a voice that sounded like ringing bells. "I have calculated the probability that humans will fight back against us," it announced to the other crystal beings. "The chance is 0.0003%. This means it is almost impossible. Even if they use all their factories and work day and night, they could only build 4 to 7 ships that might be dangerous to us. We have over 10,000 warships. We will lose perhaps 1 or 2 ships at most." The crystal beings glowed brighter with satisfaction. Mathematics never lied, and the mathematics said that humans were helpless. In the strangest place of all, the Void Walkers lived in a dimension between normal space and the Shadow Realm. High Scion Mordun floated in this dark place, connected mentally to the consciousness of his entire species. His gray skin seemed to absorb light, and his completely black eyes could see into people's minds and souls. He reached out with his mental powers, trying to read the thoughts and emotions of humans across the galaxy. What he found made him even more confident of victory. "The human minds are completely closed to psychic power," he reported to his fellow Void Walkers through their shared mental connection. "They have no telepathic abilities at all. Their brains work only on basic animal instincts. When our ships arrive and I project fear directly into their minds, their leaders will immediately surrender. They will be too terrified to even think about fighting." All 3 alien empires were completely certain that conquering humanity would be easy. None of them noticed the strange things that were happening throughout human space during those 72 hours. On a large asteroid called Epsilon 7 that was supposed to be a mining station, Supervisor Cho Hyun-woo sat in his control room looking at banks of computers. The asteroid looked exactly like a normal mining operation from the outside, with big machines for digging rocks and processing minerals. Cho received a coded message on his personal communicator. He read the short message, then walked over to a control panel that was hidden behind a fake wall. He typed in a long sequence of numbers and letters that he had memorized years ago. Immediately, the entire asteroid began to change. What had looked like mining equipment started moving and reshaping itself. Huge panels opened in the asteroid's surface, revealing massive weapons that had been hidden inside. These were not the simple metal shooting guns that the aliens expected. These were weapons that could destroy entire fleets of ships with a single shot. Similar transformations were happening on hundreds of other asteroids throughout the solar system. Each one had been disguised as a simple mining or research station for decades, but now they revealed their true nature as heavily armed fortress platforms. Captain Yoon Jae Minute was in command of a ship called Seoul Dawn, which looked like an ordinary cargo transport that carried food and supplies between planets. The ship's registration listed its cargo as agricultural supplies, which was technically true, though not in the way anyone would expect. When Yoon received his activation codes, he pressed a series of buttons on his control panel. Suddenly, the outer hull of his ship began to change. Large sections of metal plating fell away, revealing a completely different vessel underneath. This hidden ship was sleek and dark, with a hull that seemed to bend light around it, making it nearly invisible. The agricultural supplies in his cargo hold were actually advanced weapons that would soon feed the hunger for justice. Deep in Earth's Pacific Ocean, Admiral Kang So-young commanded what appeared to be an underwater research station studying sea life. When she received her orders, the ocean floor around her base opened up like a blooming flower. What rose from the depths were not scientific instruments, but massive defense platforms capable of shooting down any ship in the solar system. All across human space, the same pattern repeated. Things that had looked harmless and primitive for 50 years suddenly revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous. The masquerade was ending, and humanity was about to show the galaxy what they really were. Exactly 72 hours after he had first asked for time to think, Ambassador Lee Minute-ho walked back into the giant council chamber. This time, the alien leaders had positioned themselves in a half-circle around where he would stand, like hunters surrounding their prey. They wore their most impressive armor and weapons, wanting to look as powerful and frightening as possible. The chamber was even more crowded than before. Word had spread throughout the galaxy that the humans were about to surrender, and many alien species had come to watch what they thought would be an amusing spectacle. The air buzzed with excitement and cruel anticipation. Supreme Commander Vextar could barely contain his eagerness. He did not wait for the formal ceremony to begin before speaking. "Well, human? Has your pathetic species finally accepted that you have no choice but to obey us?" Minute-ho stood in the center of the chamber, still wearing the same simple black business suit he had worn 3 days earlier. While all the aliens around him displayed golden armor, glowing weapons, and jeweled decorations, he looked like an ordinary office worker. He calmly straightened his tie and looked directly at Vextar. After talking extensively with our leaders on Earth, he said in his polite diplomatic voice, "I am afraid we must respectfully decline your generous offer." The chamber exploded with harsh laughter that echoed off the walls like the sounds of wild animals. Some aliens roared, others made clicking noises, and a few produced sounds so strange that human ears could barely process them. They thought Minute-ho's refusal was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Hai Sion Mordun's mental voice invaded everyone's minds, dripping with cruel amusement. "Did you actually believe you had any choice in this matter, little human? Do you think your words mean anything to us?" The laughter grew even louder. Several alien delegates pointed at Minute-ho with claws, tentacles, and appendages that had no names. They whispered to each other in their various languages, making jokes about human stupidity and stubbornness. However, Minute-ho continued, and something in his voice made the laughter begin to fade. There was a new quality to his tone, a quiet authority that had not been there before. "We would like to present a small demonstration of our position on this matter." At that exact moment, on the other side of the galaxy, something impossible was happening on Zephyr Prime, the home world of Supreme Commander Vextar. His personal fortress was the most heavily defended structure in the known universe. It had stood unconquered for 3,000 years, surviving attacks from entire fleets of enemy ships. The fortress was protected by energy shields so powerful they drew energy from the core of a captured star. These shields could stop planet-killing weapons and reality-warping attacks. Nothing in the galaxy was supposed to be able to penetrate them. A single object, no bigger than a grain of rice, struck the outer energy barrier of the fortress. The shields, which had never failed in 3 millennia, collapsed instantly like soap bubbles popping. The tiny projectile was moving at nearly the speed of light. It passed through every defensive layer of the fortress as if they were made of paper. It flew through walls of solid metal, energy barriers, and force fields without slowing down even a little bit. Finally, it came to rest exactly in the center of Vextar's private war room, embedding itself in the floor with perfect precision. Nobody in the fortress was hurt. The building was not damaged. But every defensive system, every weapon, every piece of military equipment in the entire complex simply stopped working. Lights went out, computers shut down, and weapons became useless pieces of metal. At exactly the same time, similar things were happening across the galaxy. On the crystal home world of the Crystalline Collective, another grain-sized projectile appeared directly in the center of their grand archive, the most sacred and protected place in their civilization. This projectile somehow bypassed their dimensional barriers, which were supposed to make their world exist in a separate layer of reality. In the shadow realm between dimensions where the Void Walkers lived, a third projectile materialized in their convergence chamber. This was supposed to be impossible, since their fortress existed in 11 different dimensions at the same time, making it unreachable by any physical attack. But these 3 strikes were just the beginning of something much larger. Across the entire galaxy, every major military base, every weapons platform, every command ship, and every hidden research facility belonging to the alien powers received the same treatment. Weapons platforms orbiting distant stars suddenly went dark. Command ships patrolling the outer edges of space found their systems failing. Secret research bases hidden in pocket dimensions were somehow reached and disabled. In the span of exactly 1.7 seconds, 18,437 separate targets were struck simultaneously. The attacks happened across distances of thousands of light-years, yet they were perfectly coordinated. Every projectile hit its target at exactly the same moment, despite the fact that light itself would take years to travel such distances. Not a single living being was harmed in any of the attacks. The projectiles were aimed with surgical precision to disable equipment while avoiding all crew quarters, life support systems, and medical facilities. But every shield generator, every weapons array, and every strategic facility in the galaxy had been rendered completely useless. In the council chamber, emergency alarms began wailing. Red warning lights flashed throughout the room as the alien leaders received reports from their military forces. Vexstar's personal tactical display showed something that should have been impossible. Every single military asset of the Zephyrian Empire was now showing shields down, weapons offline. The crystal being quintessence began flickering with panicked light patterns. "This is mathematically impossible," it said in a voice like breaking glass. "Our calculations showed this could not happen." Mordun's psychic voice was no longer confident and mocking. Instead, it carried a note of fear. How did they coordinate attacks across the entire galaxy instantaneously? Even our psychic powers cannot communicate faster than light over such vast distances. Minute stood calmly in the center of the chaos, his hands clasped behind his back. "Honored delegates," he said, his voice somehow carrying clearly over the noise of alarms and panicked voices, "this was merely a demonstration. As you can verify, no one was harmed. We simply wanted to show you that your assessment of our capabilities may have been incomplete." Within 6 hours of the impossible attacks across the galaxy, the alien leaders called an emergency meeting. But this time, everything was different. The huge council chamber that had once been filled with proud displays of weapons and armor now felt like a place of fear and confusion. The alien delegates no longer sat confidently on their floating platforms. Instead, they huddled together like frightened children trying to understand something far beyond their comprehension. Supreme Commander Vexstar walked back and forth across the chamber floor like a caged animal. His 4 arms shook with barely controlled panic, and his red eyes darted nervously around the room. Gone was the arrogant commander who had demanded human slaves just hours earlier. In his place was a being trying desperately to understand how his entire military force had been disabled in less than 2 seconds. "Our best scientists have analyzed what happened," he said, his voice cracking with stress. "Somehow, the humans fired projectiles from locations we could not detect. These projectiles traveled faster than light itself while hitting targets across the entire galaxy with perfect accuracy. According to every law of physics we know, this should be completely impossible." Archive node quintessence, the crystal being that prided itself on mathematical perfection, was flickering with chaotic patterns of light. Normally, its crystalline form glowed with steady, beautiful colors that showed its calm and logical thinking. Now, it flashed with rapid, confused patterns like a broken computer trying to process too much information. "I have performed 4 to 7 million probability calculations," it said in a voice like shattering glass. "I have checked and rechecked every possibility. The chance of achieving such perfect coordination using any technology we understand is absolutely zero. The humans must possess science that works outside our understanding of space and time itself." High Scion Mordun, who had always been confident in his mental powers, now floated uncertainly in his corner of the chamber. His psychic voice, which had been so mocking and cruel before, now carried a tremor of genuine fear. "I tried to read the human ambassador's thoughts during his speech," Mordun's mental voice whispered into everyone's minds. "What I discovered troubles me more than I can express." His mind was protected by barriers that I have never encountered before. It was as if his consciousness existed partially outside our normal reality. I could not penetrate even the surface of his thoughts. The three species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years now sat in stunned silence, trying to process the fact that everything they thought they knew about the universe was wrong. They had believed themselves to be the most advanced civilizations that had ever existed. Now they realized they were like children playing with toys while adults watched from the shadows. Vextar stopped pacing and turned to face the other leaders. His desperation had transformed into anger, and anger was something he understood much better than fear. "We cannot allow this challenge to our authority to continue," he declared, his voice growing stronger. "If we cannot rule the humans, then we will destroy them completely. I am ordering Operation Final Strike." Operation Final Strike was the Zephyrian Empire's most extreme military action. It meant sending every available warship to attack a single target with the goal of total annihilation. It was a strategy they had used only 3 times in their 10,000-year history, and each time it had resulted in the complete destruction of entire star systems. "Every ship in our fleet will converge on the human solar system," Vextar announced. "We will use planet-killing weapons to turn their world into dust. If we cannot understand their technology, we will simply eliminate it from existence." The mightiest fleet in Zephyrian history assembled quickly. 300 warships, led by the massive dreadnought called Eternal Conquest, prepared for the journey to Earth. These were not ordinary military vessels. They were ships capable of destroying entire worlds, equipped with weapons that could tear holes in reality itself and drive systems that allowed them to travel between dimensions. Vextar stood on the bridge of Eternal Conquest, surrounded by his most experienced officers. The ship was over 10 miles long and carried enough firepower to destroy 100 planets. It was the pride of an empire that had conquered over 1,000 worlds and enslaved countless species. "Set course for the Sol system," he commanded. "Maximum speed. I want to arrive before the humans have time to prepare any more surprises." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Park Soo-jin sat in her command center deep beneath the Seoul Institute of Technology. Around her, dozens of screens showed the approaching alien fleet and the current status of human defense systems scattered throughout space. Her assistant, Kim Dae-eun, monitored communications from secret bases that the galaxy had never suspected existed. "Dr. Park," said Colonel Jorn Soo-hyun, the military officer who served as a liaison between the scientists and Earth's hidden defense forces. "Our long-range sensors show the Zephyrian fleet approaching. They have 300 ships, including their largest dreadnought. Estimated time of arrival is 18 hours at their current speed." Soo-jin studied the tactical display showing the enemy fleet. Each red dot represented a ship capable of destroying cities. Together, they formed an armada that could turn Earth's surface into molten rock. "They are bringing everything they have," she observed calmly. "How disappointing," Soo-jin said with a sigh that carried the weight of centuries. "After our demonstration, I had hoped they might choose wisdom over pride. Some children never learn." Dae-eun looked up from her console with concern in her eyes. "Dr. Park, Admiral Kang is requesting permission to activate the Pacific Defense Grid. She wants to engage the fleet before they reach Earth's orbit." Soo-jin shook her head firmly. "Permission denied. This situation requires a more educational approach than simply destroying their ships." She reached over to a special panel that had been hidden behind a sliding cover. With practiced movements, she placed her hand on a scanner that read her palm print, retinal pattern, and DNA signature simultaneously. "Computer, initiate Protocol Omega. Authorization code, Park Soo-jin 77 Alpha." A synthetic voice responded immediately, "Protocol Omega confirmed and ready for execution. Warning, this action will reveal the full extent of human technological capabilities to galactic observation. All concealment protocols will be permanently disabled." Soo-jin looked around at her staff, seeing the mixture of excitement and nervousness on their faces. For over 50 years, they had maintained the illusion that humanity was a primitive, weak species. Now that masquerade was about to end forever. "Acknowledged," she said firmly. "Execute Protocol Omega." The Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, exactly where their computers had calculated would be the optimal position for beginning their attack. Vextar stood proudly on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his sensors began to map the locations of Earth's defensive forces. "Just as our intelligence predicted," he said with satisfaction, looking at the tactical display. "A few dozen primitive ships and some basic orbital platforms. Begin the bombardment immediately. I want nothing left of their world but space dust." But as his weapons officer prepared to fire the first shot, something impossible happened. The fleet simply vanished. 6 months had passed since the mighty Zephyrian fleet had mysteriously vanished without a trace. During this time, The entire galaxy had slowly come to understand that everything they thought they knew about the universe was completely wrong. The great alien empires that had once ruled over thousands of worlds now found themselves questioning their most basic beliefs about power, technology, and their place in the cosmos. In a beautiful new space station called Harmony, representatives from every known species in the galaxy gathered together for the first time in history. The station floated peacefully in neutral space, far from any empire's territory. It was humanity's gift to the galaxy, a place where all species could meet and talk without fear of war or conquest. The station itself was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Its corridors seemed to bend space in impossible ways, making it feel both intimate and vast at the same time. The walls glowed with a soft, warm light that made everyone feel calm and safe. Gardens filled with plants from 1,000 different worlds grew in gravity-defying spirals, and the air smelled of flowers that bloomed in perfect harmony despite coming from completely different environments. Dr. Park Soo-jin stood at the center of the great assembly hall, facing hundreds of alien delegates who watched her with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and respect. She was an elderly human woman with kind eyes and gray hair, wearing simple clothes that made her look like someone's grandmother rather than one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. For the first time in over 50 years, she was not hiding behind lies or pretending to be something she was not. The gentle smile on her face held depths of knowledge that spoke of eons spent watching over younger species like a patient guardian. "Many of you have questions," she began, her voice somehow reaching every corner of the vast chamber without any amplification. "After everything that has happened, you deserve honest answers." Supreme Commander Vextar sat in the front row, looking very different from the proud and arrogant leader he had been just months earlier. His ornate armor had been replaced by simple robes, and his forearms no longer gestured with commanding authority. Instead, he leaned forward like a student eager to learn from a wise teacher. "How long have you been watching us?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine curiosity rather than anger. "How long have humans been hiding their true nature?" Sujin's smile grew warmer as she considered how to explain something so vast and complex in simple terms. "Since before your species ever left your home planet," she replied gently. "Humans have been traveling among the stars, planting seeds of life, guiding the growth of civilizations, and caring for developing species for over 50,000 years. The Zephyrian Empire, the Crystalline Collective, the Void Walkers, in a very real sense, you are all our children." This statement sent waves of shock through the assembly. Archive Node Quintessence, the crystal being that prided itself on logical thinking, began flickering with patterns of confused light. "Then why did you allow us to believe we were the most powerful forces in the galaxy?" it asked, its musical voice carrying notes of bewilderment. "Why did you hide your true nature and let us think we were in control?" Dr. Kim Dae-eun stepped forward to answer this question. She was revealed now as one of humanity's most senior scientists who studied alien life, rather than the simple assistant she had pretended to be. "Because that is what good parents do," she explained patiently. "They let their children make mistakes, learn to be independent, and develop their own unique personalities. We only stepped in when it was absolutely necessary to prevent serious harm." Hai Sion Mordun's psychic voice carried a note of hurt pride as his thoughts reached into everyone's minds. "But you manipulated our development. You controlled how we evolved and grew." Ambassador Lee Minute-ho, still wearing his simple black suit, shook his head gently. "Guided, not controlled," he corrected. "Every choice your species made was truly your own. Every scientific discovery, every cultural achievement, every moment of growth, all of it was authentically yours. We simply made sure you had the opportunity to make those choices without destroying yourselves in the process." Colonel Jeon Soo-hyun activated a massive holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. What appeared was a three-dimensional map of the entire galaxy, but it looked nothing like the star charts the aliens had been using for thousands of years. "These are the real borders and territories of galactic space," he explained, pointing to different colored regions that showed the true organization of the universe. "Every habitable star system, every major trade route, every source of strategic resources, all of it has been carefully managed for millennia to prevent the kind of total wars that could lead to mutual extinction." The assembled delegates stared in amazement as the display showed the intricate web of planning that had shaped their entire history. Lines of force and influence crisscrossed the galaxy like a vast neural network, with humanity's hidden installations serving as nodes of control and guidance. The seemingly random distribution of resources that prevented your empires from completely destroying each other. John continued. The convenient placement of neutral zones that served as buffers between hostile territories? The mysterious space anomalies that redirected your fleets away from confrontations that could have escalated into galaxy-wide extinction events. He paused to let this information sink in before delivering the final revelation. All of it was carefully engineered by human guardians working behind the scenes. We have been the invisible shepherds guiding galactic civilization away from the brink of self-destruction for 50,000 years. The chamber fell completely silent as the magnitude of this revelation settled over the assembly. These species that had thought themselves the masters of the universe now understood they had been children playing in a carefully maintained playground, watched over by parents they never knew existed. Vextar was the first to break the silence. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now that we know the truth, how do we proceed?" Sujin's expression became even more gentle and motherly. "Now you get to choose your own path forward," she said warmly. "You can continue governing your own territories, managing your own affairs, and pursuing your own destinies. The only difference is that now you know you are not alone in this vast universe. You never were." "And if we choose to reject your guidance?" asked another delegate. "Then you reject it," Minute-Ho replied simply. "We will not force our protection on anyone who does not want it. But we also will not allow genocide, the destruction of entire planets, or the deliberate elimination of developing civilizations. Some boundaries must remain non-negotiable." The assembly began to murmur with discussions in dozens of alien languages as the delegates processed this new reality. For the first time in galactic history, they were talking to each other as equals rather than as conquerors and conquered, rulers and subjects. Sujin looked out over the gathering with the satisfaction of a teacher watching her students finally understand an important lesson. "You are good children," she said softly. "You just needed to be reminded that growing up does not mean you have to grow apart." In the months that followed, galactic civilization experienced a renaissance unlike anything in recorded history. Trade flourished without the constant threat of military conquest. Scientific knowledge was shared freely between species that had once been enemies. Worlds that had been isolated by fear opened their cultures to peaceful exchange and cooperation. And throughout the galaxy, in quiet observation posts that no longer needed to remain hidden, human guardians continued their ancient watch, proud parents observing their children as they learned to build a better future together. The galaxy had finally learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their advanced technology or their hidden weapons. It was their infinite patience, their wisdom to guide without controlling, and their love that was strong enough to let their children find their own way while ensuring they never walked alone.